Hello everyone, and welcome to Animation Pilgrimage, the show where Whitney and I take a look at every single theatrically released animated film in chronological order. I'm Tennille.
And I'm Whitney, and today we are here with another Disney film after 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a long span of time, probably one of the longest spans of time that Disney ever has between their movie releases, right? Like around in the 70s into the early 80s is like when they really spaced their movies out.
Yeah, the other time that there was this big space, but we didn't feel it as much, was during the 50s. During the 50s, we had Cinderella, Alice, Peter Pan almost right away at the early part, and then it wasn't until like the second half of the 50s we got Lady and the Tramp, and then like another 4 years after that was Sleeping Beauty.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't feel it as much because there just wasn't as many movies back then.
Right.
But here in the late 70s, early 80s, there's a million movies. So we haven't watched a Disney movie since The Rescuers.
Yeah. Which
that was a long time ago.
1977?
77,
Yeah.
so 4 years.
Yeah. And, you know, I just want everyone to go ahead and buckle in because this is going to be a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot to say about this film. So
there's a lot that happens with the movie and behind the scenes that is going to shake up animation history.
Nostalgically, this is one of my favorite films. It's a film I grew up watching a lot, but it's continued to be one of my favorite films due to the history behind it, which is interesting because a lot is happening at this time, and yet none of that focus is necessarily about this movie.
But it needs to be talked about
leads
now.
Into things to come. So it's very interesting. So everybody get your popcorn, get a drink, and let's talk about The Fox and the Hound. Whitney, do you want to start with a summary?
Yeah, let's go ahead and summarize this movie.
Mm-hmm. In case you've never seen Fox and the Hound.
So, an orphan fox pup is taken in by an old widow woman. She is feeling lonely, so she takes this small baby who just had its mom killed by a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Also next door is a hunter who may or may not be the killer of the mom. It's never specified or talked about, so it's ambiguous.
I will say this is based on a book, and in the book you can find a lot of answers to these questions, but for the movie's sake, I would say that Amos did not kill Todd's mom just because of the way that things are timed.
Mm-hmm.
He's like in town getting a dog.
Yeah.
when this all happens.
Yeah, because, like you just said, he comes home the same day with a new bloodhound puppy. And these two, the fox named Todd and the dog named Copper, become instantaneous friends because they don't know that they're not supposed to be friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so they grow up and it's great for like 2 days.
For 2 days.
And then Chief finds out, Chief is the other dog
of the hunter,
mm-hmm. finds Todd and chases him around, and this leads to the chicken pen. And then the hunter sees them and thinks the fox is trying to get his chickens, which is not true. Mm-hmm. But that's what he thinks happens because that's what he sees.
Well, that's because that's what quote-unquote foxes do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing off of
his
stereotypes of what he knows of foxes.
Yeah.
So then he chases the fox back over to the widow's home, I guess technically onto the road, shooting his gun wildly a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he swears he'll get that fox someday. And then he leaves on a hunting trip. He leaves on a hunting trip for all of winter, taking both of his dogs with him.
Separating Todd and Copper.
Todd and Copper are separated, and they're like, oh, that's sad. And Todd's like, well, he's still my friend. He'll be my friend when he comes back. And Big Mama, who is an owl, who is just there, kind of, she's like, I don't think so, honey.
It always used to frustrate me as a kid that Big Mama's character seemed inconsistent here because she's the one who sings the song Best of Friends. And then
As soon as
and
they
then
leave.
as soon as Todd and Copper are separated, she's like, all right, Todd, enough is enough. You can't be friends with Copper anymore. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, that always frustrated me. But now looking back at it, I'm like, no, I see why. Yeah. I see why this is happening the way it's happening.
So winter passes. Mm-hmm. Copper becomes an excellent hunting dog.
He's surpassed Chief, the other dog.
He's better than Chief. He's the best at everything. And he comes back home in the spring.
There's a great little character arc where it shows them leaving and, like, Chief is sitting in the front because, you know, he's the top hunting dog.
Yes.
And throughout the winter, Copper has surpassed him. And then at the end of winter, when they come back, Copper is the one sitting up front. And, like, that's just a great little, like, and it's such a small thing, too. It's one of the few instances where I think this film isn't super heavy-handed in what it's trying to tell you with the characters and how they're feeling at that moment. Where, like, Copper is coming to his own and how that makes Chief feel. Leading into this next scene where...
Mm-hmm. We come back and... Todd is an idiot and immediately goes over and immediately starts talking to his friend. And Copper's like, we've changed. I've learned now through osmosis and being forced to that I'm not allowed to be friends with you. I'm supposed to kill you. You need to leave.
Because I don't want to kill you.
Yeah.
So please get out of here. But Chief wakes up.
Chief wakes up and immediately chases him again. And they go all over the place, and eventually Chief gets hit by a train.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, obviously the scene before this, showing where Chief is at, like, Chief is dead set on getting Todd, partly because he feels so insecure about what's happened over the winter. Mm-hmm. He wants to prove that he's still the better dog than Copper.
Yeah.
But Copper finds Todd during the hunt, and chooses to
let him go just
this once. And that's what gets Chief hit.
Yeah, and then Chief gets hit by the train after that. And then Copper's like, no, screw this. Mm-hmm. You're dead.
Yeah, you're dead, Todd.
Next time I see you, you're dead. Mm-hmm. So the widow, knowing that this is obviously not great, she takes him out to a nature preserve and lets him go. Mm-hmm. In a very sad scene because, you know, this fox has been her pet. And to keep him safe, she's like, I can't have you anymore, so you have to live out here in the wild.
Well, because she knows it's either she has to keep him locked up in her house or he's going to get killed. Because he obviously keeps going over to Amos Slade's house. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Todd has a bad night. Mm-hmm. But then the next morning, he is introduced to Vixie, who is Girl Fox, whose only characterization is she is girl and wants to have Todd's babies.
Yep. And this makes Todd feel better.
Yeah, it makes Todd feel better because now he's horny or whatever.
I mean, good for Todd.
Good for him.
He needs a pick-me-up.
So Amos Slade the hunter decides, oh, this is a non-hunting area? I don't care. I need to kill that fox. So he takes...
Because he almost killed my dog.
Mm-hmm. So he's taking Copper into the nature preserve for revenge! Mm-hmm. And so he chases Todd.
They set up a bunch of bear traps.
Mm-hmm. Bear traps.
Bear traps for a fox.
Okay, they're not bear traps. They're small enough. They are more so like fox traps.
Yeah, but I just consider anything that is that, like... claw mechanism to be a bear trap.
It would still need to be bigger to capture a bear.
Especially a bear in this film.
Because as he's chasing Todd, they disturb a giant bear who then wrecks the hunter and Copper's shit. Oh, Todd feels bad and like a good person, so he turns around and he fights the bear as well.
At this point, I'm bawling. I'm just so...
Which causes Todd and the bear to go over the waterfall. Mm-hmm. And then the hunter's like, all right, I came here to kill this fox. I'm killing this fox. And Copper says, no. And he stands over Todd. He's like, no. He just saved our lives. And he's still my best friend in there. We can't kill him. And so the hunter finally relents and they leave permanently. And the two best friends are separated forever because the message is maybe the races shouldn't mix.
You really just had to end with that, didn't you?
I mean, that's the message of the movie.
It is.
And it's a really sad message.
Yeah,
Because
it sucks.
I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but just recontextualize the fox and the hound as a black kid and a white kid. And this movie gets incredibly sad.
I mean, it's incredibly sad.
It's incredibly sad.
But then
anyways,
you add
but then
people to it, and you're like, oh, shit.
This is about racism, and it's like, yeah.
Well, and I mean, like, anyone who says that it's not about racism, you're wrong.
They're fooling themselves.
You're fooling yourself. Like, there's a song in the middle where Big Mama has to tell Todd about how, how Copper's got the hunter and the hunter's got the gun. And, like, how life's unfair and all this.
Dead because of lack of education.
Yeah. It sucks. But I do want to say that it's such a bittersweet ending that I almost feel like that's the point. And I think that this is a movie that could only be made during this time period.
Present day Disney would not make this movie.
No, somebody would stop them before they got this far.
Personally, I feel like this is the darkest and most depressing Disney movie.
Yeah.
Like, the next movie we're watching is The Black Cauldron, right?
Mm-hmm. Which is...
Oh no, that one's dark because it's got skeletons and death. Sure, but it's really boring. But this movie, the point of the movie is really depressing and dark and realistic. And that sucks.
Yeah.
This is the darkest Disney movie.
Personally, I want to give the stories the benefit of the doubt here. And I want to say that the bittersweet ending and the kind of awful message at the end is kind of the point. Mm-hmm. Like, you get to that ending and you can't help but be like, but it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be this way. They should be able to be friends. They should be able to still see each other. And, and that's the part where you're like, this just sucks. We need to change society so this doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. And, that's what I take away from the movie. But that is my own, personal, feelings when I watch this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not everybody feels the same way.
Yeah, it's obviously you could take a different meaning from this, but that's how I've always felt about this film. I always feel like critics at the time, whenever a new Disney movie comes out, are completely brain dead, and they, don't pick up on anything that the movie is trying to say. They just, completely check out.
The very obvious, not even subtext.
Yeah, they're just like, wow, Disney made a movie about talking animals. I'm bored. Just don't pick up on anything that the movie is trying to say, except for good old Roger Ebert, who did, at the time, write that this was a rather thoughtful meditation on how society determines our behavior. And I'm like, thank you!
Yeah. He's like, this is a movie about prejudice. It's really obvious.
Whereas other reviews at the time, you'll see, Disney's being really corny and chintzy and blah, blah.
Songs every 5 seconds.
Even though there's,
lighthearted songs. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no lighthearted songs in this entire movie.
I'm depressed after watching this. I don't know what you watched, but okay. All that being said, this movie is strikingly bittersweet, harsh, beautiful, and, at the same time, completely mediocre. Mm-hmm. There is so much good stuff in this film that the bad stuff really rears its ugly head.
There are 2 bird characters who are just here as comic relief, and they come out of nowhere all the time, and
they
they're
take
not
up a third of the film.
They're just chasing a caterpillar. They have nothing to do with the plot. Mm-hmm. They help the plot once near the beginning of the movie, and they didn't need to be there. They help the widow find Todd in the first place, but that didn't need to happen. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they are literally just in the way. They're not funny, they're obnoxious, and they are tonal whiplash, to say the least.
Yeah, because so many times it's like, ooh, look at this wacky stuff of the birds chasing this caterpillar, and then it's like...
Todd, we can't be friends anymore.
Willow Tweed taking Todd out into the woods and dumping him, and I'm just like, I can't. Oh my god. And, you know, the sad thing is there was almost more of that kind of stuff in this film. There's almost a complete non sequitur of, after Willow Tweed dumps Todd out into the woods, there was going to be a song where two cranes like fly up to Todd and sing this like doobie doobie doo scat song just out of nowhere.
Okay.
That was going to be in the film. But okay. I just there was also that was one of the sequences that Willie Ryderman wanted in the film. And this is one of the last, well, this is the last production Willie Ryderman directed. He's been directing for a lot of these Dark Age Disney films, and it's during this film that he and other co-director Art Stevens start to really, really clash with the younger group of animators who are coming into the studio.
Because I guess that's really important context. The 9 old men are all but gone at this point.
Yes, you have Wooly is still directing, but he hasn't been animating since, like, Lady and the Tramp.
A while. A long while.
Yeah, but he's been directing, and, you know, you can say a lot about Wooly's stuff, but as a director, he butted heads with the artists a lot, and it's because he was a very, like, pragmatic director. And he wanted things done a certain way and wasn't really open to a whole lot of new ideas. Frank and Ollie are still animating at the studio. This is the last film that they're working on, but both of them admit that they have a really hard time drawing at this point. Like, drawing just does not... It has never come super naturally to Frank, according to him. But, like, just drawing is difficult at this point for him.
Age and presumably arthritis.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, Frank and Ollie are working on their book, The Illusion of Life. And I just kind of want to talk about that for a second, because if you don't know animation history, the Illusion of Life book was one of the first really public animation tools, like textbooks. And that has not come out yet.
At this point in history.
At this point in history. It will come out after this movie is released.
Mm-hmm.
That just kind of tells you how far we've come as far as, like...
Tools for new animators?
Tools for new animators. Because it used to be, at this point in time, you had to go to school to learn any animation. And the Disney stuff was really, like, kind of top secret. Nobody was allowed to know how Disney made their movies.
Mm-hmm.
So this book is not out yet. And at the same time, Frank and Ollie are trying to make this book, doing their last bit of animation on this movie, and getting ready to retire. So then a bunch of these young kids are coming in, learning under Frank and Ollie. And at the same time, the whole Disney structure, like, corporate up, is changing as well. Michael Eisner is coming in. In the next few years, Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg are going to be coming in.
None of that's happened yet, though.
No, but it will be happening in this in-between time from between Fox and the Hound and the Black Cauldron's release.
Yes.
So I kind of want to cover that. Is that, like...
Well, do you want to cover it all here? Or
no,
when
I'm
we
not...
get to the Black Cauldron?
I just want to mention that, like... These new people are going to be coming in, and, like, everything at the studio is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all the old people are leaving. All these new people are coming in.
This is, like, the final point of stagnation before things
really
start to break and change.
Yeah. And that's not to say that new people hadn't been coming into the studio. Don Bluth, who I will be talking about quite a bit here, had been working on Disney movies for the last several films. Glenn Keane had already been hired and had been working on a few films. So
a bunch of new, younger people.
Right. But, included in these group of new people is, of course, Glenn Keane gets a bigger role here. He gets to animate the bear sequence, which is like one of the best sequences of the film. It's so good. Tim Burton is on this movie, which just makes me laugh.
Wasn't he working on either, like, young Todd or Copper or both?
Yeah, he hated working on this because it was so cutesy.
Draw all these little cutesy animals.
Yeah, just not his thing. Brad Bird started animating at Disney at this point. John Lasseter, John Musker, Ron Clements, Henry Selick, Mark Dindal, Randy Cartwright. Like, all of these animators are coming in during this film. And they're really... I think they have a good time with Frank and Ollie. Frank handled the scene where Todd and Copper meet, on the log, and they're doing all the cute little hide-and-seek stuff. And Ollie animated the scene with Todd and Vixie meeting.
Okay.
So I just think that's fun when we can pull out exactly what scenes animators have done. Frank and Ollie also did a lot of, like, draw-overs for the younger artists and stuff like that. But where the young animators really butted heads was with Willie Ryderman. Willie Ryderman was the one who decided that Chief shouldn't die. Because originally, in the book and in the original script of the movie, Chief dies.
And it'd be a lot better if he did for the story.
Oh yeah, the young animators were all like, this story doesn't work if Chief doesn't die. Because Copper's motivation doesn't make sense if Chief just has a broken leg. And they actually went past Ryderman and went up the ladder and were like, Chief needs to fucking die or this movie doesn't work.
We need to kill the dog.
Yeah. And eventually the higher ups were like, no, just listen to Art Stevens and Willie Ryderman. Chief won't die. So that was a big fight. The scatting cranes was a big fight. There was a lot of just fights over the tone of the film. And in general, from what I can find, no one working on the film really felt like they were doing anything new or special with this movie. A lot of the animators just felt like they were copying Disney films of the past, but doing a poorer job of it.
I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, and...
Again, there's nothing super special here other than the message is dark for once, and...
It's really depressing, and it could have been better told had there not been all this, like, infighting. You can also tell that this is the point where Disney has hired a bunch of new talent in, because there's a lot of characters that, if you have a really keen eye, you can tell that some scenes are just, like, over-animated, especially when compared to The Rescuers, where everything was so, like, slow and methodical in the pace.
To the point where things moved too slowly when they should have been moving quicker.
Right. And then you get to this film, and there's a lot of characters moving when they don't really need to. Speaking of which, if we're going to talk about over-animating, is it time to talk about Don Bluth?
Let's talk about Don Bluth. I immediately picked out one of the scenes that Don Bluth animated in this movie, and I'm terrible at this.
Yeah, usually I'm the one who's like, oh, that one was animated by so-and-so, and you're like, okay.
And I'm like, oh, the scene with the cow, and Todd being picked up by...
Willow Tweed,
the widow. I'm like, yeah, that's Don Bluth. Like, that's really obviously Don Bluth doing that because it moves like a Don Bluth cat.
Don Bluth cat.
Animal, whatever.
Character?
Yes.
You can just use the word character.
I don't know. His animals move in a very particular way. It's a Don Bluthism.
So yeah, Don Bluth did animate the scene of Willow Tweed Do I keep saying Willow Tweed? Widow Tweed.
Yeah, you keep saying Willow Tweed.
Sorry, Widow Tweed in the barn with Todd. And a couple of other sequences. And several other animators as well worked on scenes for this movie, but they are uncredited because in the middle of production for this film, Don Bluth, John Pomeroy, and Gary Goldman all went to Ron Miller's office, who was like the head of the animation. Well, actually, no, just like the head of Disney Studios at the time. And we're like, we're done. We're retiring. And Ron Miller's like, okay, then you all need to pack up your stuff and leave right now. Like, leave by noon. And so they did, and they said that they didn't want credit on any of their work in the movie. And, of course...
They took a lot of the animators with them.
Yeah, they took, like, 13 animators with them, which was, like, half of the main production animators. So they left mid-production of this film, and then they're going to leave and start their own studio, and they'll be making The Secret of Nim, which we won't see for another several years, but...
Technically, we've already seen one thing that they worked on.
Yes, but they worked on that while they were still at Disney.
Really?
Well, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. For some reason, I thought that, like, timeline-wise, they had already made that.
No. Timeline-wise, work finishes up on The Rescuers. Bluth and several other animators, as a side project, decide to work on Banjo the Woodpile Cat.
Okay.
That releases in 1979. In 1979, Disney is actually really wanting to push production of The Black Cauldron. But due to just the problems of trying to condense a, 5 or 6 book series into one movie, it's going through a lot of story problems.
Who could have seen that coming?
They do Fox and the Hound as we need something for these animators to do while we're struggling to move production along on Black Cauldron. So Fox and the Hound really was not a movie anybody really wanted to work on. It was a movie that's like, we need something for all these new animators to do because they are going crazy and they just need something to do. They've got all this energy that they have to get out. Plus, we still kind of need to train them in the Disney style. So we've still got Frank and Ollie around. So let's have Frank and Ollie kind of take them under their wing before they leave. And the mid-production, Frank and Ollie leave and, Ryderman quits. And Don Bluth quits. And then you just have all these fresh new people trying to wrap up sequences for this film and get it out. And it already had to be delayed from summer 1980 to winter 1981 or something like that.
Oof.
Yeah.
Things were not going well for the Disney studio.
No, and it's just fascinating that it's such a heavy film that went through all this hard production history and still turned out such a decently mediocre film.
This wasn't an absolute train wreck of a movie.
Yeah.
And it could have been. It easily could have been.
I mean, even choices like having Mickey Rooney, Kurt Russell as Todd and Copper are kind of strange because neither have really done voice work before. Kurt Russell was an early Disney kid, but hadn't really done anything with animation. But they ended up liking his voice reads when they brought him in, so he got the part of Copper. And then Mickey Rooney had just finished up work in Pete's Dragon.
Who is he in Pete's Dragon? Is he Pete?
I think so. I honestly don't know a whole lot about Pete's Dragon, I'm going to be honest here.
I watched that movie once. It was really boring.
Well, yeah. Fun fact, Don Bluth animated more in that movie than...
Okay. I mean, I believe it. We're not covering Pete's Dragon on Animation Pilgrimage.
No.
Obviously.
That's already come and gone. But yeah, and then Mickey Rooney was just kind of pulled over from Pete's Dragon.
He can't be Pete. He's too old to be Pete. Pete's a child. He's probably like Pete's dad or a cop or something like that.
Dude, you forget, how long ago this was.
His voice is an adult's voice. He's not the child from Pete's Dragon. I'm telling you this right now.
We can look it up.
It's on screen who he played. Arguing about a dumb movie from the 70s. He also played Santa Claus in Rankin Bass.
Yes, he did.
And I didn't realize it was the same guy until we watched this movie again.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't recognize voices as a child.
I guess speaking of recognizing voices, the only other actor I really want to point out here, I mean, Pearl Bailey does Big Mama, and I always really liked her take on Big Mama. It was a very, like, warm character.
Tigger and Piglet also cameo in this movie.
Yep. Pat Buttram is back as Chief. He also does...
Oh, yeah, of course.
The Sheriff of Nottingham, Napoleon in the Aristocats.
Who the hell is Napoleon?
One of the dogs. I'm the leader. I'll decide.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I've forgotten the Aristocats and like everything that's happened in that movie because it's very boring.
Fair enough.
I forgot those dogs even existed.
I just really like Pat Buttram's voice as like a voice actor. It's a shame he doesn't do more. He had like also a bit part in The Rescuers. He was one of like the swamp people.
Swamp animals.
The swamp animals. One of the last roles he does is in a Goofy movie. He plays like the MC for the Possum Park.
Who's your favorite possum?
He's not that guy, but he's like, now everybody say hello to the possum pals or whatever. I just really like his voice. It's really good.
It's a good voice.
Mm-hmm. And he does a good job.
It's a very
as
distinct
Chief.
voice.
Yeah. He self-describes it as a voice that never went through puberty.
Okay.
But another thing that makes it so that you can kind of tell that this is like the handing off to the new people at Disney is, and again, this is another thing just comes to like the subtlety of the animation and stuff, but none of the characters in this film have the same realism that Bambi or 101 Dalmatians had.
Mm-hmm.
Fox and the Hound is a lot more akin to the kind of plush Disney look that, like, The Lion King has.
Mm-hmm. They're less of animals and more of caricatures of animals.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those subtle things, but it's just one of those subtle things that makes it so that you can tell the difference that, like, this is where the handoff is happening.
Mm-hmm. I'm just suddenly remembering the absolute stunning beauty of Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
And how that's not present here. And it hasn't been for a while, but like all the great people and immaculate
the attention
detail
to the art direction.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't exist here. Characters will frequently go off model.
Oh yeah, Todd and Copper especially, like, you might not notice it on a first or second watch, but if you are really dissecting the scenes and looking like scene to scene, you can tell when a different animator is working on the characters.
Widow Tweed has like 5 different faces.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, Don Bluth worked on her a bit. I'm pretty sure Glenn Keane worked on her, because there's a couple of scenes where I'm like, that really looks like Keane's work.
Mm-hmm.
The backgrounds are beautiful. I love the backgrounds for this film.
Yeah, the backgrounds are pretty. They stay
and the animation
good.
Overall is like beautiful.
Yeah,
but
it's good.
There is a lack of consistency.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that really kind of does wrap up my thoughts on Fox and the Hound. It's one that I just, you know how you had your stories talking about like rewatching Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
I have the same kind of stories of rewatching Fox and the Hound. I think it was Fox and the Hound that I sat down and watched, where I remember sitting down and watching it with my mom, and when the title screen came up and it said like Walt Disney Pictures, my mom said, "Oh, I remember when Walt died." And as a kid, that blew my mind. And that is like, I kind of credit Fox and the Hound for being the film that got me interested in animation history. Because as a kid, like, all of these films that I grew up watching were just things that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Films.
didn't realize...
You didn't really think about how they came to exist.
Made by real people. And just the simple thing of my mom saying, "I remember when Walt died." As a kid, it was just like, okay, wait, Walt Disney is a person?
Yeah, it took me a really long time as well, because no one told me Walt Disney's the name of a person that made a company that made all of these movies.
Right.
It's just Walt Disney. Disney's a weird nonsense word that represents this group of movies.
Yeah, but like...
No, that's a guy.
It was a guy, he lived, he made films that I loved, and he was dead already. And that, like, broke my little 6-year-old heart. And I haven't been the same since. It is a defining moment in my life, so thank you, moment in my childhood of watching Fox and the Hound for probably, like, the 100th time. But I also had, like, one of those cassette tapes that was just, like, the Fox and the Hound storybook that I listened to over and over again. Mm. And I just remember this film being one of those that, as a kid, whenever I needed a, like, quiet moment or I wanted to just, like, feel sad, I would watch this. So, yeah. It was just that perfect, like, I need to sit and be introspective for a while. And so this would be the film I would watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know that I really have a similar experience. Obviously not with this film, but, like, I don't think as a kid I was ever like, man, I want to feel sad now.
I did. I don't know why. I was just like, oh... I need to cry. And so I would watch this movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So overall, I would definitely say, check this one out. If you haven't seen it in a long while, or haven't ever seen it, I definitely think this one's worth a watch.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely got its problems, but the history behind it is, personally, I think just one of the fascinating things, and, like, just a really... like, big turning point for animation. And it's really cool. So anyway, yeah. Mm-hmm. Next time, we go back to Japan! Hurrah! Who would have seen that coming?
Sanrio is bringing us another film, The Sea Prince and the Fire Child. So join us back here next time as we find out what that's all about.
Yeah.
Is like the end, but in my heart's the mill.